He crashed that changed everything. Marcus Hawthorne wiped the sweat from his weathered forehead as he stepped out of his farmhouse in rural Montana. The morning sun painted the endless wheat fields golden, and the familiar smell of earth and growing crops filled his lungs. At 55, Marcus had lived alone on his family's farm for the past decade, ever since his father passed. The isolation never bothered him much. He had his livestock, his crops, and the peaceful rhythm of rural life. That morning started like any other until the sky exploded. A brilliant streak of light tore across the dawn sky, followed by a thunderous boom that rattled every window in his house. Marcus shielded his eyes as something massive crashed into his north pasture, sending up a pillar of smoke and debris. His cattle scattered in panic, their bellowing echoing across the fields. "What in the hell?" Marcus muttered, grabbing his rifle from the porch. He climbed into his old pickup truck and drove toward the crash site, his heart pounding with equal parts curiosity and concern. The crater was enormous, at least 30 feet across and 10 feet deep. At its center lay what could only be described as a ship's leak, metallic and definitely not from Earth. Steam hissed from cracks in its hull, and strange symbols glowed faintly along its surface. As Marcus approached the wreckage, a section of the hull suddenly opened with a soft hiss. He raised his rifle, finger on the trigger, ready for anything. What emerged wasn't the little green man of science fiction movies, but something far more extraordinary. She was unmistakably feminine, though clearly not human. Her skin had a pale blue tint that seemed to shimmer in the morning light, and her hair was silver white, flowing like liquid mercury. She stood about 5.5 feet tall, with an athletic build and movements that seemed almost impossibly graceful. What struck Marcus most were her eyes, large, luminous, and filled with an intelligence that made his breath catch. The alien woman took a few unsteady steps before collapsing to her knees. She was injured, with what appeared to be burns along her left arm and a gash on her forehead that leaked a substance too dark to be human blood. Marcus lowered his rifle. Whatever she was, she needed help. "Hey there," he called out softly, approaching with his hands visible. "You hurt?" She looked up at him with those extraordinary eyes, and when she spoke, her voice was melodic despite the obvious pain. "Please. Sanctuary ... they pursue." Her English was accented but clear. Marcus glanced at the sky, half expecting to see pursuit ships or government helicopters. The horizon remained empty, but he had a feeling that wouldn't last long. "Can you walk?" he asked, offering his hand. She stared at his outstretched palm for a moment before placing her own against it. Her skin was warm despite its alien hue, and Marcus felt an unexpected jolt at the contact. She nodded, allowing him to help her to her feet. "My barn's not far," he said. "We can get you patched up there." As they walked slowly across the field, Marcus couldn't help but wonder what he was getting himself into. The woman, he assumed she was female, based on her appearance, leaned against him for support, and he found himself acutely aware of her presence. She smelled like rain and something floral he couldn't identify. "What's your name?" he asked as they reached the barn. "Zephyra," she replied, the name rolling off her tongue like music. "I am grateful for your kindness, Marcus Hawthorne." He stopped walking. "How do you know my name?" She offered a small smile that somehow seemed both innocent and mysterious. "Your thoughts? They are loud." The nesting begins. 3 days passed since Ephia's arrival, and Marcus's quiet farm life had been turned completely upside down. He'd set up a comfortable space for her in the barn's loft, bringing her blankets, pillows, and food. What he hadn't expected was how quickly she would make herself at home, or how dramatically she would change his property. Marcus discovered the first surprise when he went to milk his cow, Bessie. The barn had been transformed overnight. Soft, Bioluminescent moss now covered the walls, pulsing gently with a soothing blue-green light. Crystalline formations had sprouted from the corners, humming with a barely audible frequency that seemed to calm the animals. "Zephyra," he called up to the loft. "What did you do to my barn?" She appeared at the edge of the loft, her silver hair catching the strange new light. "I made improvements. The space was sterile. Now it lives." "Lives?" Marcus stared at the glowing moss. "Is this stuff safe?" "Perfectly safe. It will help your animals be healthier, more productive. Already your cow gives sweeter milk." Marcus had to admit that Bessie seemed unusually calm and content. The old girl hadn't kicked over the milk bucket once since the modifications appeared. Over the following days, more changes manifested. The vegetable garden began producing fruits and vegetables of impossible size and quality. His chickens laid eggs twice their normal size, with shells that shimmered like opals. Even his wheat fields seemed to grow taller and more vibrant. But it was on the 7th day that Marcus discovered what Zephyra meant by nesting. He entered the barn to find her in the loft, surrounded by a dozen translucent pearl-like spheres, each about the size of a basketball. They pulsed with the same gentle light as the moss, and Marcus could swear he saw shadows moving within them. "Zephyra," he said slowly, "what are those?" She looked up at him with an expression of pure joy and pride. "Our offspring." "Are they not beautiful?" Marcus nearly fell off the ladder. "Our what now?" "Offspring. Children. The bonding has been successful." "What bonding?" We haven't." Zephyra tilted her head, looking genuinely confused. "Bonding does not require physical joining, Marcus. Your kindness, your protection, your care, these created the resonance needed for reproduction." Marcus sank down onto a hay bale, his mind reeling. "You're telling me that because I helped you, we're now parents?" "In a sense, yes. Though the young will not emerge for several moon cycles." She moved to one of the spheres, stroking it gently. "They will be strong, like their father, protective and kind. But I'm human. You're whatever you are. How is this even possible?" "I am Valkyrie. My species bonds with compatible life forms when the emotional and spiritual connection is strong enough. Your soul called to mine, Marcus. You saved me, sheltered me, cared for me without asking for anything in return. This created the perfect conditions for new life." Marcus stared at the glowing spheres, his children, apparently. The situation was impossible, insane, and yet, looking at Sapphira's radiant smile, he found he couldn't bring himself to be angry. "So what happens now?" he asked. "Now we prepare. We protect. We become a family." She moved closer to him, her luminous eyes serious. "But first, I must tell you something important. My people will come looking for me. And when they find me here, bonded to a human with hybrid offspring, what will they do?" Zephyra's expression darkened. "They will not understand. They will see it as contamination, as weakness. They will try to take me and destroy what we have created." Marcus felt a familiar stubbornness rise in his chest, the same feeling he'd had when developers tried to buy his land or when the bank threatened foreclosure after his father's death. "Let them try," he said firmly. "This is my land, my home, and you're under my protection." Zephyra's smile returned, brighter than before. "This is why I chose you, Marcus. Hawthorne. Your species may be young, but your hearts are vast." Contact and conflict. The ships arrived on a Tuesday morning, 3 sleek vessels that descended from the clouds like silver tears. Marcus had been expecting them for weeks, ever since the fire explained her people's likely reaction to their bonding. He'd spent that time preparing, though he wasn't entirely sure what preparation looked like for first contact with hostile aliens. Zephyra emerged from the barn, her previously calm demeanor replaced by visible tension. The spheres containing their offspring had grown larger and now pulsed with a more urgent rhythm. "They have found us," she said simply. Marcus stood beside her, his hunting rifle in his hands, laughably inadequate against alien technology, but it made him feel better. "Your people? The Valkyrie Collective Council. They will demand my return and the destruction of our bondspawn." Her voice carried a mixture of sadness and defiance. "They view emotional bonding as a weakness that makes us vulnerable to manipulation." The ships landed in Marcus's wheat field with surprising gentleness, their hulls not even disturbing the grain. Ramps extended, and figures emerged tall, elegant beings that shared Zephyr's basic physiology but lacked her warmth. Their skin was paler, almost white, and their eyes held a cold intelligence that made Marcus's skin crawl. The leader, distinguished by elaborate silver markings on her forehead, approached with measured steps. When she spoke, her voice carried across the distance with unnatural clarity. "Zephyr 977, you will return to the ship immediately. Your unauthorized bonding with this primitive species has violated 7 major protocols and contaminated your genetic line." "I am no longer Zephyr 977, Zephyr replied, moving to stand closer to Marcus. "I am Zephyr Hawthorne, bonded mate to Marcus of Earth, bearer of hybrid offspring. I choose to remain." A ripple of something like disgust passed through the assembled Valkyrie. The leader's eyes fixed on Marcus with the kind of look someone might give a particularly unpleasant insect. "Human," she said, the word dripping with disdain. "You have corrupted one of our kind with your primitive emotional responses. Release her from your influence, and we will allow you to live." Marcus felt his temper flare, the same protective anger that had driven him to chase off cattle rustlers and overzealous government inspectors. "Now you listen here, lady. Zephyra came to me injured and scared. I helped her because it was the right thing to do. Nobody corrupted anybody. Your emotional projections created an artificial bond that damaged her neural pathways. She cannot think clearly while under your influence." "Can't think clearly?" Marcus looked at Zephora, who gave him an encouraging nod. "She's the smartest person I've ever met. She's turned my farm into something that could feed half the county and improve the health of every animal I own. If that's damaged thinking, I'll take it." The Valkyrie leader raised her hand, and the air around Marcus suddenly felt thick and oppressive. He struggled to breathe, his vision blurring at the edges. "You will release her, or you will die." That's when Zephyrus stepped forward, and Marcus felt the oppressive force vanish. Energy crackled around her, her skin glowing brighter than he'd ever seen it. "Counselor Prima, you will not harm my bonded mate or threaten our offspring." "Your offspring are abominations that must be destroyed," Prima replied coldly. "As must this human who has weakened you so completely." "Weakened?" Zephyra laughed, a sound like silver bells mixed with thunder. "Watch and learn what human bonding truly provides." She raised her hands, and the very air around them began to shimmer. The bioluminescent moss on the bar walls flared to brilliant life, and the crystal formations began to sing with harmonic frequencies. But more than that, Marcus felt something flowing through him, strength, purpose, and a connection to Zephyrah that went deeper than anything he'd ever experienced. Wheat field around the Valkyrie ships suddenly erupted with growth, the grain stalks stretching skyward and intertwining to form barriers. The ships themselves became entangled in the rapidly growing plants, their hulls covered in a web of green and gold. "Impossible," Prima breathed. "No Valkyrie has shown such power in millennia." "No Valkyrie has bonded with a human," Zephyrah replied. "You see weakness where there is strength. You see contamination where there is evolution." Marcus stepped forward, feeling the power flowing through their connection. "I don't know much about your people or your politics," he said, his voice carrying farther than it should have. But I know what I see. Zephyra isn't weakened by our bond, she's stronger. And so am I. The power of human heart. The standoff lasted 3 tense hours. More Valkyrie ships arrived, circling overhead like metallic vultures. But none could land in the writhing mass of enhanced wheat that now covered most of Marcus's property. The plants had grown to impossible heights, forming a protective barrier that hummed with energy. Inside the barn, the offspring spheres had begun to crack, thin lines of golden light seeping through their translucent shells. Zephyra knelt beside them, her hands glowing as she channeled energy into the developing life forms. They're responding to the threat, she explained to Marcus, who watched in amazement as the cracks spread. Our bond spawn are accelerating their development to protect the family unit. Is that normal? Nothing about this is normal, Zephyra admitted with a smile. Valkyrie offspring typically gestate for a full solar cycle. But human emotional resonance is amplifying everything: our connection, my abilities, their growth. Prima's voice echoed across the farm, amplified by Valkyrie technology. Zephyra, your defiance has consequences beyond yourself. The Council will declare Earth a contamination risk. Your entire species will be marked for quarantine or elimination. Marcus felt his blood turn cold. She's threatening Earth? Empty threats, Zephyra said, but he could see the worry in her luminous eyes. The collective does not engage in planetary destruction without significant cause. What would constitute significant cause? Before Zephyra could answer, the first sphere cracked completely open. What emerged made Marcus's breath catch in his throat. The being was clearly a hybrid humanoid in general shape, but with Zephyra's luminescent skin and his own sturdy build. Most remarkably, it possessed both human expressiveness and Valkyrie intelligence, its young eyes already alert and aware. My God, Marcus whispered as more spheres began to crack. They're beautiful. Within minutes, 12 hybrid children had emerged from their spheres, each unique but clearly sharing characteristics from both parents. They moved with impossible coordination, almost as if they shared a collective consciousness. The eldest, if minutes of age difference could make one. Eldest approached Marcus and spoke in a voice that somehow carried both childlike wonder and ancient wisdom. Father, the danger comes from fear. They fear what we represent. What do we represent? Marcus asked, kneeling to meet the child's eyes. Evolution, the joining of emotion and logic, instinct and intelligence. We are what both species could become. Zephyra moved to stand beside them, her hand on Marcus's shoulder. The collective has grown stagnant in their pursuit of perfect logic. They've forgotten that growth requires risk, that strength comes from connection, not isolation. Outside, Prima's patience had apparently reached its limit. The trapped ships began to glow with ominous energy, and the temperature around the farm started to rise dramatically. She's charging weapons, Zephyra said grimly. She would rather destroy everything than allow our bond to continue. That's when something unexpected happened. The hybrid children looked at each other, then at their parents, and smiled with perfect synchronization. As one, they reached out their hands, 6 toward Marcus, 6 toward Zephyra. The moment their small fingers made contact, power erupted across the farm like nothing Marcus had ever imagined. The enhanced wheat didn't just grow, it evolved, becoming something entirely new. The stalks developed a metallic sheen and began generating their own energy fields. The bioluminescent moss spread beyond the barn, coating every surface with a network of living light. But most importantly, Marcus felt his consciousness expand. Through the bond with Zephyra and their children, he could sense the Valkyrie ships, feel the fear and confusion of their crews, even touch the cold determination of Prima herself. They're afraid, he realized aloud. All of them. They're terrified of feeling what we feel, of having connections that make them vulnerable. Yes, Zephyra agreed. But you can show them that vulnerability is not weakness. Marcus understood. Standing with his alien family around him, he projected his thoughts outward with an intensity he'd never known he possessed. Not anger or defiance, but something far more powerful: love. Love for Zephyra, for their impossible children, for the life they were building together. Love for his farm, his land, his simple human existence that had somehow become the catalyst for something extraordinary. Effect was immediate and dramatic. Across the farm, Valkyrie soldiers began lowering their weapons. In the command ship, Prima herself staggered as the full force of human emotional connection hit her consciousness. For the first time in her long life, she felt what it meant to truly care about another being more than herself. A new beginning 6 months later, Marcus's farm had become something unprecedented in galactic history. The first official embassy between humanity and the Valkyrie collective. The impossible wheat fields now housed a small city of mixed architecture, part human practicality and part Valkyrie elegance. Prima herself had taken up residence in a crystalline structure that grew from the earth like a living thing. The cold, logical counselor had undergone a remarkable transformation since that first day. Her emotional awakening had been painful, but ultimately liberating, and she now served as an ambassador between the old, collective ways and the new possibilities represented by human Valkyrie bonding. The Council has approved 12 more bonding trials, she informed Marcus as they walked through the hybrid settlement. Volunteers from both species have requested the opportunity to explore emotional integration. Marcus nodded, still amazed by how much his life had changed. The 12 hybrid children, his children, had grown rapidly, developing into young adults with capabilities that astounded both species. They served as translators, teachers, and living examples of what cooperation could achieve. What about Earth? Marcus asked. How are the governments handling all this? Prima's expression became almost human in its complexity, a mixture of amusement and frustration. Your species is remarkably adaptable. After the initial panic, they have become eager to learn, perhaps too eager. We've had to limit technology, transfers to prevent cultural shock. Zephyra approached from the direction of their expanded home, carrying what appeared to be blueprints made of light. The agricultural improvements are ready for global implementation, she announced. The enhanced crops will increase Earth's food production by 400% while healing damaged soil. And the other planets? Marcus asked. 7 collective. Worlds have requested hybrid consultation for emotional integration protocols, Prima replied. Your concept of heart is spreading through our civilization like a beneficial infection. Marcus smiled at the description. And that doesn't worry you anymore? I have learned that some infections strengthen rather than weaken the host. Prima's expression softened expression that would have been impossible for her just months ago. My own bonding ceremony is next week. You found someone? Dr. James Morrison from your agricultural university. He is teaching me about soil, composition, and the joy of growing things with one's own hands. I am teaching him about stellar navigation and the peace that comes from understanding one's place in the cosmos. As they spoke, one of the hybrid children, Kai, who had inherited Marcus's stubbornness and Zephyra's intuitive understanding of energy systems, came, running up with obvious excitement. Father, Mother, Counselor Prima, the deep space sensors have detected something extraordinary. What is it? Zephyra asked, immediately alert. Ships, but not Valkyrie. Not human either. The signatures are completely unknown. Kai's young face glowed with anticipation. We're about to make first contact with an entirely new species. Marcus felt the familiar mixture of apprehension and excitement that had become his constant companion since Zephyra's arrival. How many ships? Just one, but it's enormous. And it's transmitting something music, we think. complex harmonies that suggest advanced emotional development. Prima looked at Marcus with an expression of profound respect. Your species has. A phrase, I believe. Here we go again. Marcus laughed, reaching for Zephyra's hand while ruffling Kai's silver hair. Yeah, but now we're not going alone. Above them, the alien ship hung in Earth's sky like a golden note waiting to be played. And in the farm that had become a beacon for interspecies cooperation, 3 different kinds of beings prepared to welcome whatever new wonders the universe had to offer. The barn where it all began still stood at the center of the settlement, its bioluminescent moss now spreading in patterns that told the story of a simple farmer who chose kindness over fear, and in doing so, changed the course of galactic history. As Marcus often told the visitors who came to learn about the human Valkyrie bond, sometimes the most important thing you can do is offer shelter to a stranger. You never know what might grow from that one act of decency. The end.